The latest from the brief from Brussels, EU funding for infrastructure in Eritrea has been caught up in a project using forced labour. The UK will no longer take part in the EU student exchange programme Erasmus after Brexit. And 2 Catalonian MEPs will have their salaries reinstated after the European Court of Justice ruled they were entitled to immunity from prosecution. Eritrea in the Horn of Africa is one of the most repressive countries in the world. Last year, the EU funded a road project there which was partially built using forced labour, according to the New York Times. It also says Brussels has no means of monitoring the project, supported by 20 million taxpayers' euros. The exposé has caused outrage amongst human rights activists.
For the EU to rely on the government to do its monitoring, I think is incredibly problematic, especially when obviously, some of the issues the EU will be discussing with the government are around labour force. And as we know, the government has quite bluntly said that, it will continue to rely on national service conscripts.
The funding of the road project in Eritrea is part of the EU Trust Fund for Africa, aimed at addressing the root cause of migration. Yet Eritrea's system of forced national service incarcerates anyone trying to flee, especially youngsters.
The EU has made support for democracy a more prominent objective in its relations with African countries since the early 2000s, I would say. And the EU has put more emphasis in developing its instruments to support democratic reforms. But the context now for democracy support in Africa and globally is a very different one, because there's more of a competition of political models with China and other actors.
The EU Commission says it was aware that conscripts were used for the road project, but that Brussels funded only material and equipment and not labour. The British government has voted against continuing full membership of the EU's student exchange programme Erasmus+. Since it began in 1987, more than 200,000 British students have studied or worked in Europe as part of Erasmus. And likewise, many more European students have gained the opportunity to study in the UK. Catalonia's recently reinstated MEPs Carles Puigdemont and Toni Comín are to have their salaries paid retroactively. Each MEP may be paid up to €70,000 due since July last year. The move is a direct consequence of the European Court of Justice ruling, which granted them immunity.